in all of these platoons up until the last one, were there ever any instances where something happened where there was a grievance, or any fellow platoon mates, accused you of anything that was, below board of what the expected rules of engagement were, or the protocols and statutes that we as Navy SEALs live by? Were there any issues with anybody prior to the last deployment?
Not one.
Not one.
No, there's never any issues in my previous deployments. As a matter of fact, I always, thought I excelled. I was always trying to prove myself to my peers. It's all about peer evaluation when you're in the teams, and just trying to be worthy of being around those guys. And, I had a pretty solid reputation up to this last platoon.
Were there any instances outside of deployment, the workup or the stateside time, where there were any behavioral instances where you got in trouble or had any issues with the command?
No,
not a single one. So I think that's something that, again, just looking at it as a bystander of not knowing you, in the community and having never worked together. And now, I've been out for a decade, seeing what's painted versus, what's out there, what the reality is that there's a pretty, heavy perception that you have a pattern or a history of that.
Oh yeah. And I've heard, it's funny, the more guys I run into now, especially team guys, they tell me what's been put out about me. It's, and that's coming from senior leadership. I've heard everything from I've had multiple DUIs to, it's just stuff that's completely not true. I don't have any of that on my record, and I don't know why that stuff is said about me. They're trying to construct a narrative about me so people think a certain way, but yeah, I've never been in trouble like that. And it sucks that there's people out there trying to put that narrative out about me, but that's just not true.
Yeah. To me, that's an important component to get out there, because that makes a difference. However, going into this last deployment, which was the battle for Mosul, correct? Mm-hmm. That's where a lot of the incident took place, where everything kind of got into trouble. If you could, what I'm curious about, especially having been a SEAL and done multiple platoons, from the time you started, because this was your 8th platoon, basically, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah, 8th deployment.
Yeah. So you've done lots of platoons, lots of workups. Been with probably some of the same groups of guys, new groups of guys, whatever, different commands. From the time that you got into that platoon, was there anything different from the start before you ever went on deployment? Like during the workup, were there red flags? Were there things that stuck out as wait a minute, something doesn't seem right? Or did you guys gel pretty well and it seemed like a pretty standard workup?
There was definitely I had to do a lot of thinking back after all this, especially when I was sitting there in a jail cell. I was like, how did this, come to this? The platoon I took over was rated the worst platoon the prior rotation. It was Alpha Platoon. They didn't do so hot during ULT, and just,
And ULT is for the
workup. Sorry, again.
Yeah, no, I only know it because I catch hell every time. I don't know what the fuck you were saying.
So yeah, pretty much the training cycle up to deployment. They didn't do so hot. I didn't know any of those guys, but that was a word around the team. I was told I was taking over that platoon after the UAE deployment. So in my mind, I was like, okay, these guys didn't do so hot prior. As the platoon chief, I'm going to, I don't know, I wouldn't say whip them into shape, but sort of, get them on par with where they're supposed to be. And I wanted to, obviously, like every other platoon chief, have the best platoon at the team. So when I took over, I implemented some training there's a professional development phase before you start workup, when guys are going to schools, but I would implement, two times a week, and we were doing just the basic CQC, pre-assault procedures, everything to get us ready for workup. There was a little bit of complaints during that. Guys were like, this is our free time, which in my mind, I'm like, that's there's no free time. We train for war. This is our skill craft, skill, and you only get good at it by constantly, mastering your craft for hours. So, but there was really no big red flags during workup. The guys were definitely a different personality from my previous platoons. They were not, and maybe it's because I was an outsider. These guys, a lot of these senior guys had been together for 3 platoons already, and I was a platoon chief coming in. But the cohesiveness wasn't there as far as like on the outside of training. Because usually before, platoons will get together for barbecues or, to build that camaraderie. Like I tried to have that a couple times at my house, or we'd put it together at a restaurant. It was almost like you're pulling teeth to get these guys together.
Why do you suppose that is? I mean, did you get how sometimes like you can tell, some people are fucking oblivious when they're that guy, There's been instances where like you can just tell somebody doesn't like you or, whatever. Was there any of that? Like, did you feel like you're the hard ass new chief that's making shit harder than they're used to, and now they're despising you for it, and or was there none of that, and it just seemed like it was lost on everything?
There was definitely 2 guys, and this is pretty much the gist of how this all happened. There's 2 senior E6s, Dalton Tolbert and Dylan DeLay. They despised me from the get-go, for I don't know what reasons. I could probably, that. So when I took over this platoon, they were constantly talking shit about their previous leadership, their previous platoon chief and previous LPO.
In terms of him being weak or being a dick?
Being weak.
Okay.
Being weak and being incompetent, which, they tell me all sorts of stories. And I was like, okay, whatever. This is not how it's going to be this time. I just don't like these guys, or I don't think these guys being like told what to do. And then it was definitely, they could never be wrong. So we'd be training, and if you pointed something out, like, hey, you screwed up there, and they're that type of attitude. Like, instead of taking criticism on board, it was like, well, it's not my fault, it's yours, or it's somebody else's. And these 2 guys definitely didn't like me from the get-go, but they didn't, they were professional about it as far as like not showing any signs of it to my face. But behind the scenes, and I came to find out this later, they were pretty much spreading toxicity into the platoon, like, oh, we don't like him, like, and they'd find little nuances about me that they didn't like and sort of embellish them to try and get the platoon to take their side. But that really didn't blow up until the deployment. Once I was on deployment, and this is where things really shifted, is I had an LPO who was a rock star. Me and him were pretty tight. He picked up chief right before we deployed, and our sister platoon, their platoon chief ended up getting shot in the chest and got sent home. So I shifted him over to that platoon to take over. Once I did that, that's when Craig Miller was next in line, and he was peers with these 2 guys that I mentioned, Dylan DeLay and Dalton Tolbert. And I really don't think he just didn't act as an LPO. The LPO, and for people listening, is sort of like, he's a middle management guy, I guess, in civilian equivalent, but he's in charge of middle management. He is like the...
To me, manager is kind of the best.
Yeah. So he keeps the pulse of the platoon, and then if there's something wrong, he comes to the platoon chief and is like, hey, guys are either bothered by this or they're questioning this. And then, you deal with it with the LPO, like, okay, and either fix the problem and, or tell the guys, like, this is the way we're doing it. That never happened. Craig Miller would never come to me, say anything. He pretty much joined these guys on the hate train. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest problem here. And that carried on through the deployment. And I really didn't catch wind of it till the very end. And that's when we sort of had it out.
Yeah.